97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with Geoff Mosher, powered by InsideTheBirds.com.
We expect to win every time we step on the field. That's just the mindset that we have.
Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
All right, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. Football at 4, powered by InsideTheBirds.com. We're going to talk to Geoff Mosher for Mosher Monday edition of Football at 4 right now, here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Geoff Mosher joins us to discuss a little bit more on the NFL and the Eagles and stuff. What's going on, Geoff?
Hi, everybody.
Hey, man. All right, Football at 4, powered by InsideTheBirds.com. Geoff Mosher is here with us. We got a lot to get into. One, we talked about this. This came out last week. You had reported about the Eagles coaches and what they're going to have to do to kind of get this all started here. And it seems like things have even changed, not with the Eagles, just the NFL in general since that point. But give us a little update on what the Eagles coaches are going to need to do to get back into the building here.
Yeah, what I had reported was that, what's out there publicly from the NFL is that camp will technically begin July 28th for every team. I think rookies and select veterans will report on the 21st. But the Eagles and Jeffrey Lurie, who has been kind of, I would say, I don't want to say at the forefront, but he's just obviously taking every precaution as possible for what he can control. And he can't control what goes on with the players because of that. A lot of that has to be collectively bargained between their union and the owners. But with his own coaching staff and administrators and so forth and so on, he's having them report as early as, I believe, this Friday, whatever July 10th is, right? Today is the 6th, right? So the Friday is the 10th. He wants everybody from his coaching staff and anyone who's going to be involved from training camp, medical people, personnel people, although there's going to be a lot fewer personnel people at camp this year than the past. But those people have to be. Has that been verified?
Has the number been verified?
The number of what?
Players that will be at camp.
Well, they're still working on the roster size as well. Right now it's 90, but it sounds like the NFL really wants to truncate that to a different number that's going to have to be agreed upon with the players' union as well. But for Friday, the people that have to be here are the coaches and the staff, and they have to then quarantine for 7 days and then take tests on the 17th. And then depending on what comes back with the test, then they can go forward with, being in the building and things of that nature.
Now, it was reported also this weekend that the Eagles will have rookies report July 22nd, the team veterans July 28th. So I guess the coaches are going to get there a little bit early. They'll get the opportunity to kind of get their stuff together, and then the players July 22nd. So, Geoff, we're looking at about 3 weeks here before this gets off the ground. Does it feel like that is going to happen without a speed bump?
I think it's going to happen. I don't know. The speed bump part of it, Mike, will come as players arrive, kind of like you're seeing now in baseball, right? As players arrive, as they get tested, we'll see if a large amount of players are testing positive for COVID and then have to be quarantined and how that might impact things going forward. But as I've said, as Adam Kaplan has said, whatever platform we have, the NFL is going to try to follow its schedule to the T for as long as it possibly can. And if it has to make an adjustment, it will make an adjustment, just like you're seeing now with preseason games. But I don't, the train will go until it's told it must stop.
How much hope did the Eagles have that undrafted players, specifically maybe the running back position, would make an impact on this team? And is that in jeopardy now because you don't really know what's going on with the roster size and what type of undrafted players you're going to keep if you do got to let some guys go before any sort of camp even happens?
It's a good question, Hunter, and I think that every kind of media person, right, every reporter or podcaster or people sitting in your chair as well are waiting to play that game, right? When the final number of roster is announced, be it, 75, 80, whatever, then you do the math and figure out how many must be subtracted immediately. and you start to play that game of, well, who goes? And so could it be that one of the two rookie running backs, rookie free agent running backs that you were just talking about, one being Mike Warren, the other being Adrian Killens? Could be. Or they could decide that's a position that they don't have great depth at, so you keep those two and you make trims other areas. You know, we've talked about Tay Olson, the linebacker, rookie free agent linebacker. Joe Osman, who's coming back from an ACL surgery, but now finds himself in a very, very crowded defensive end picture that also has Jannard Avery and also has Sharif Miller and also has Josh Sweat, and then the two starters. So maybe, and then also the kid that they drafted from Stanford in the 7th round. So maybe he's one that never gets that opportunity. You know, the cornerback, Prince, undrafted free agent, and the wide receiver, Manasseh Bailey. I mean, all those names kind of get thrown into the equation there of who's going to have to be the quote-unquote sacrificial lambs to meet the roster size.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting dynamic here. And now, Jeff, as we're hearing, you know, all right, 2 games are out. That hurts some of those back-end guys. What happens if all 4 games, which the NFLPA apparently is pushing hard for, right, to just say let's get rid of the 4 preseason games altogether? That adds an even deeper effect to those players.
Oh, it does. I mean, for everyone, for the coaches, players. I mean, I do think the coaches use the preseason games at their disposal to evaluate players. And sometimes, while we all talk about the meaninglessness of it, and it is, from an evaluation standpoint, I think coaches like to evaluate the players, how their players perform against different players. You know, training camp is you versus if you're an offensive player, it's versus your defense. If you're a defensive player, it's your offense, and you're practicing against that set every single day. That's why the coaches nowadays talk about how much they like those joint, because they're not preseason games. There's not travel. There's not so much involved. It's not a big hubbub, but you get to have 3 or 4 or 5, usually like 3 or 4 good hard practices against another team. Again, that's going to show you some different looks and show you some things that you're just not seeing every single day practicing against yourself. So those helped, and those won't be available either. And so the whole evaluation process is hurt by it. And then, of course, as we're talking about, the bottom roster players are going to suffer. And it'll be interesting to see, if there are no preseason games, what the coaches do with their reps in practice as it pertains to veterans and rookies and newcomers. You know, guys who don't normally play, like a Jason Kelce. The coaches may say, you know what, we're just not going to practice him very much. We want to keep him healthy. We need him for the season. He doesn't need to learn the offense. We really need to see if Nate Herbig can be a really good backup center or even play right guard. So we're going to give Kelce a lot of, they did that with Jason Peters just because of his age last year and trying to get Dillard into the mix. I just think that there's going to be some new philosophies, ideologies, and strategies incorporated in the training camps this year because of this.
Well, it's interesting you bring up Jason Peters because he definitely knows what he's doing and a veteran guy as well. And do you think that he is still in play? I mean, he's out there. What happens if, let's say Andre Dillard, not even an injury, but maybe he has to quarantine at some point? You got to protect Carson Wentz's blind side. So is Jason Peters still in play for the Eagles?
Yeah, I think, COVID or no COVID, he's in play, Hunter. It's just a matter of, how strongly the Eagles were feeling about Andre Dillard. And, Adam Kaplan and I are on different viewpoints of what we think the Eagles should do, but he does make a good point when he says, with all this lack of preseason games and without having seen Andre Dillard in the spring, and you just don't know what you're going to get in the first 2 weeks of training camp, which might be more like walkthroughs. If you're really trying to be the best team you can be, maybe it makes more sense to just bring Jason Peters back now. I always felt that they were going to take a look at Andre Dillard for the first few weeks of training camp and maybe a preseason game or two, evaluate him then, and then make the decision on whether they felt they needed Jason back or not. But this might, the lack of preseason games might accelerate that decision to place the phone call. We'll see.
So the thought process here is, if there's no preseason, Jeff, what does that mean for Andre Dillard? Number one, let's start with him. What does it mean for the right guard spot? I mean, if there is no preseason games, do you just hand that to Matt Pryor? Do you look for a veteran? Does that accentuate the fact that they might look for a veteran? And if there's no preseason, does that signal bad news for Dillard?
Well, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, right? If you take Matt Pryor and the right guard situation and you say, I'm a little worried, I want to go out and get a veteran, well, that veteran now has to come and learn your playbook and you'll get acclimated in a time period when that's a struggle for everybody, right? And field time is an issue. If you could look at it the other way, that's why I say it's a double-edged sword, and say Matt Pryor may not be a Pro Bowler and we may have question marks, but at least he's been in our system. This is year 3. He has played for us before. We don't have to worry about indoctrinating him into this team, what kind of scheme he played in before. I mean, there's merits to both. And, my philosophy, and I said this on the podcast, Inside the Birds podcast I dropped this morning, is that as Eagles fans may look at these things and think that they're question marks and causes for concern, and Andre Dillard now playing left tackle without any coaching this offseason, but every single NFL team has their own Andre Dillard or Matt Pryor or Darius, their newcomer or their guy who they wanted to coach up and didn't get a chance to. They're all dealing with it equally. So while left tackle is a primary spot, and I understand the importance of protecting the quarterback, every single team right now has holes and question marks that have been exacerbated by the lack of practice time and grass time, and will continue to be going into the preseason. So I'm more in favor of saying, that's your guy. You drafted him in the first round. He did play a little bit last year. He's got some work to do, but you will have 4, 5, 6 weeks here, ideally, to get him ready. Just same amount of time for every other team. So go ahead and go forward with it.
You and Adam had a chance to interview Brian Westbrook, so I want to know, what was your biggest takeaway from that interview on ITB TV?
Yeah, it was 2 things. Hunter. One was just Brian felt that if you go back to Brian's career, and we talked about in 2006 and 2007 especially, when he started to average between 20 and 24 touches per game, it really was never the intent. That's a lot of touches for a running back, specifically one with Brian's knee injury history. But if you go back and look at the Eagles during that time period, T.O. was gone. Donovan tears his ACL in 2006. In 2007, Donovan's coming back from an ACL tear, and their receivers are Reggie Brown and Kevin Curtis, which is not exactly, Larry Fitzgerald and Anquan Bull there, right? So the pressure on Brian to really be epicenter of the offense was there, and that's why he wound up touching the ball. 2006, they had a scratch and claw to win the division. Every game was a tight game. You don't take your best player off the field and stop giving him the ball in those situations. And same thing with 2007, where they finished 8-8, I believe, and struggled. They were 3 games under 500 at one point. And so you look at this year's team, and while the offense was addressed in the offseason, you brought in Jalen Reagor, and you have Deshaun Jackson coming back, and of course you have Zach Ertz and Goddard. The wide receiver picture is still a little bit questionable. We have no idea how Jalen Reagor is going to make into the offense. We don't know if Deshaun Jackson can stay healthy at 34 years old. And so the pass catching becomes an issue again, and there's always that opportunity that Miles Sanders, if he continues to improve, may have to be leaned on even more so than the 14 to 16 or 15 to 18 touches per game. I don't think that they want that, but it's just something that may become necessary if the wide receiver picture is bleak again, or if there's injuries at the tight end position, and we'd have to see. It's only year 2. I don't know how much you can expect from a year 2 player, at least for Westbrook. 2006, 2007, we're talking about his 4th years in the league where he was ready to take that mantle. But Brian does think that Miles has a lot of potential, and he showed a lot of that great pass-catching potential last year. So we'll see. A lot of people think it's going to be a breakout year for Miles Sanders. It may have to be.
Well, it was a breakout day for Patrick Mahomes, Geoff Mosher. I want to get your reaction to this. Patrick Mahomes had 2 years and $26 million left on his existing deal. He got a 10-year extension today worth over $400 million. The lowest his 12-year deal could be worth is $427 million, but it could be more. It surpasses Mike Trout's $426 million for the largest contract in North American sports ever. So, reaction to the Mahomes deal today, 10 years over $400 million.
Wow, it's a big contract. It doesn't surprise me because I think when you have the resume that he has, 3 years, 2 years as a starter, conference championship year one, Super Bowl year two, boundless potential, great organization. It reminded me of when the Eagles signed Donovan McNabb way back when to that 10-year, $100-and-something million contract that was seen as banner at that time. So this is to be expected. He was going to be the highest paid quarterback. And, if you want to put an Eagles perspective on it, this is why it makes sense to extend your quarterback when you think he's good after year 3 and not wait that another year to make him prove to stay healthy or something like that. Because if they had waited till this offseason to extend Carson Wentz, you now see the resetting of the quarterback number. What's the tag for Dak Prescott? I think $34 million. That it's going to be, or 31 million, something like that. It's going to be over 31, 32, 33, in excess of 40 million. The number just goes up and goes up and goes up. So that's why I think it was a smart thing for the Eagles last year to extend Carson Wentz and then use the last 2 years of his deal to stash some of that new money. Helps keep the cap figure low for a couple of years before it really starts to hit up. And I think in a year or two is when Carson's number will really jump compared to what it was last year and this year.
Now, this is a copycat league, as we know. Do you sense that this is more the outlier, or do you think teams, once they feel like they have their guy, might try and do this as well? I know Pat Mahomes is very special, Super Bowl, I get it, but it is a copycat league. I think that this is a little extreme, so I lean towards it being an outlier. What do you think?
No, I think it's not going to be replicated a lot because I just don't think enough quarterbacks come into the league and play at the level that Patrick Mahomes has played at in their first 2 or 3 years, stayed healthy, showed no problems to deserve that kind of money. I mean, Dak Prescott, we could say what we want about him, right? But he's played pretty well for his first 3 years, and you don't see the Cowboys running to give him that type of money. I think you have to really, really show that you are special to get something like that. I think, if anything, Hunter, and see what happens with Dak after this year, you may see more of a trend of teams reluctant to reward a quarterback who's played well, not great, but well enough to get one of those quarterback contracts and then maybe move on a little bit. Sort of like what you saw with Washington and Kirk Cousins. I'm not saying Washington made the right decision at all because they're always in quarterback, purgatory, but we'll see what happens with Dak, and we'll see what happens with some quarterbacks that come into the league over the next, Baker Mayfield and things like that, and see if just playing good is going to get them these, 150, 200 million, 300 million contracts. Teams will be a little bit more onto the next one.
All right, Jeff, we'll leave you with this. It looks like Washington will have a new team name. I don't know if you've thought of one yourself, but we have the odds for the new potential team names. Is there anything that jumped off the top of your head for the new Washington mascot, because it appears that they will have one potentially even by the start of this year?
No, I've seen a lot of interesting names out there. I think the funniest thing I saw was The Onion doing a joke story about how Snyder would change his name to the DC Redskins instead of Washington, just to completely mess it up. But I've also thought, just based on readings from down in the Washington area, that the Warriors was a kind of a natural transition for them where they could keep the color, keep it, Native American kind of symmetry, I guess, because warrior. I don't know. Yeah. That's what I was reading. And then maybe you could change the logo from instead of an Indian face or head, like kind of like the arrowhead from Kansas, just a tool or something like that.
Right.
Or they could just completely disassociate whatsoever and go with something just like the Bullets did. They went from the Washington Bullets to the Washington Wizards, and nobody said anything about it.
Well, the Vegas odds, the leader right now is the Red Tails. There, it's 3-1 to change to the Red
Tails.
Yep, I don't know.
I don't think I like that too much.
What the connection is there, but there's some odds on it. Red Tails, generals, presidents, Lincolns, veterans. I mean, a lot of stuff associated with the city. I went with burgundy. Just keep the color. We're the Washington burgundy, and you can keep that burgundy and gold as your kind of like your trademark.
It's not a bad idea, Michael. I like that better than Red Tails.
Yeah, much like Syracuse orange or something to that effect. So, all right, man. Football 4 in the books. Of course, Geoff Mosher and it's powered by InsideTheBirds.com. Check out Inside the Birds' latest podcast, dropped today, ITB TV. You can check that on the YouTube channel with Brian Westbrook and hear more on what he had to say. And Geoff Mosher, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. All right, man, we'll talk to you Wednesday.
Fellas, thanks.